Thì tiếp tục với chuỗi bài giảng về phương pháp nghiên cứu khoa học. Nếu như tuần đầu thì các bạn đã tiếp xúc với nhập môn khoa học, đã được hướng dẫn về các khái niệm cơ bản nhất về cách tìm đề tài và xác định câu hỏi nghiên cứu. Thì trong tuần thứ 2, các bạn sẽ được tiếp xúc với phần lược khảo tài liệu và cũng như là phần panel discussions. Thì bài giảng của cô Chiến như các bạn đã thấy thì rất là hay và sinh động. Thì Ngọc Hạnh tin rằng là các bạn học viên đã mở rộng vốn kiến thức của mình về lược khảo tài liệu. Thì tiếp theo thì lớp chúng ta sẽ cùng đến với tọa đàm về tư duy phản biện trong nghiên cứu khoa học với sự trình bày của cô Lê Ngọc Thảo Nguyên, anh Ngô Thanh Phú và Ê Thanh Trịnh. Thì thank you for your amazing lecture. Hạnh believes that everyone in the classroom has acquired and expanded their knowledge about literature review. So coming up next, our class will have a discussions on critical thinking in scientific research under the guidance of Miss Lê Ngọc Thảo Nguyên, Mr. Ngô Thanh Phú and Ethan Trịnh. Về phần cô Lê Ngọc Thảo Nguyên. Thì cô Thảo Nguyên hiện là nghiên cứu sinh tiến sĩ ngành lịch sử và chính trị tại Đại học Nottingham, cơ sở Ninh Ba, Trung Quốc. Đề tài nghiên cứu của cô xoay quanh chính sách ngoại giao công chúng, hiểu đơn giản là cách nhà nước tiếp cận và truyền thông với công chúng quốc tế, ngữ cảnh của các quốc gia vừa và nhỏ nhằm hướng đến xây dựng lý thuyết phi phương Tây trong lĩnh vực này. Trước khi bước vào nghiên cứu chuyên sâu, cô Nguyên từng giảng dạy tại khoa mà bạn MC hôm nay là bạn Minh Châu đang theo học. Thì đó là khoa khoa học quan hệ quốc tế của trường Đại học Khoa học Xã hội Nhân văn Thành phố Hồ Chí Minh. Cô cũng đang là giảng viên tại trường Đại học Quốc tế Hồng Bàng và thỉnh giảng tại nhiều trường đại học khác. Bên cạnh chuyên môn về quan hệ quốc tế, cô Nguyên luôn quan tâm đến công tác sư phạm tại bậc đại học và đào tạo tiếng Anh, hướng tới đóng góp cho mục tiêu phát triển bền vững số 4 về chất lượng giáo dục. Ms. Lê Ngọc Thảo Nguyên is currently a doctoral student in history and politics at the University of Nottingham, Ningbo campus, China. Her research topic revolves around public diplomacy, or simply how the state approaches and communicates with the international public with the context of small and medium countries in order to build non-Western theories in this area. Before entering into in-depth research, Ms. Nguyen taught at the Faculty of International Relations of Ho Chi Minh City University of Social Sciences and Humanities. She was also a lecturer at Hong International University and visiting lecturer at other universities. Besides his expertise in international relations, Ms. Nguyen has always been interested in pedagogy at university level and English language training. She strived towards contributing to the 4 Sustainable Development Goals in terms of educational quality. Về phần anh Ngô Thanh Phú, thì anh Ngô Thanh Phú từng là cựu sinh viên chương trình học bổng sáng tạo sáng kiến thủ lĩnh trẻ Đông Nam Á Wasili năm 2014 tại trường Đại học Montana. Anh bắt đầu sự nghiệp giảng dạy và nghiên cứu tại Đại học Cần Thơ với chuyên ngành sinh lý và sinh hóa thực vật. Và sau khi trở về từ chương trình, hiện tại anh Phú là sinh viên thạc sĩ ngành sinh học phân tử thực vật tại Đại học Hokkaido. Nghiên cứu của anh tập trung tìm hiểu cách phân tử trong tế bào thực vật mã hóa thông tin lên các cầu liên bào, ảnh hưởng đến sự liên lạc giữa các tế bào. Cụ thể hơn, anh Phú hứng thú với sự ảnh hưởng của các phân tử điều hòa lên cấu trúc và vận chuyển liên bào. Anh khảo sát mối quan hệ giữa các phân tử cellulose, sinucleocan lên sự hình thành cầu liên bào bằng cách kết hợp quan sát hình ảnh tế bào ở mức độ phân giải cao và chính sách gen. Mr. Ngô Thanh Phú was a student of 2014 Wasili Academic Fellowship on Environmental Issues at the University of Montana. He started his career as a researcher and lecturer in plant biochemistry and physiology at Canton University upon his return from the program. Currently, he is a master's student in plant molecular biology at Hokkaido University. His research seeks an understanding of how molecules within plant cells encode information on symplasmic channels, which ultimately leads to intercellular communication. His specialization is the effect of regulators on the structure and trafficking of cell walls, combining high-resolution light cell imaging with channel editing. He investigates the molecular relationship between cellulose, C-glucuron, and cellular channel formation. Ethan Trịnh. Y Văn Trịnh là một người Việt nhập cư, một người nhà nghiên cứu kiêm giảng viên TESOL chuyên đào tạo giáo viên, đang giảng dạy và hoàn thành chương trình tiến sĩ tại Đại học bang Georgia, Atlanta. Các tác phẩm của Y Văn Trịnh tập trung vào sự an vui trong giáo dục ngôn ngữ, đề cao niềm tự hào về sự lệch pha như một phương pháp giảng dạy và nghiên cứu mang tính chữa lành. Các bài báo của Y Văn được đăng trên tạp chí quốc tế về nghiên cứu định tính trong giáo dục, tạp chí chính sách LGBTQ, tạp chí đồng tính, gia phả học và góc nhìn đa văn hóa, tạp chí báo cáo định tính, và đồng thời Ethan cũng viết một số chương trong các sách do Reel và Springer xuất bản. Ethan Trịnh đã xuất bản hơn 50 bài báo được bình duyệt trên nhiều tạp chí khác nhau và là đồng biên tập 3 bộ sách có tựa đề Tự sự phản biện, những người nhập cư đa ngôn ngữ ở Hoa Kỳ, nhà xuất bản Reel cùng với Luis Javier Peton Herrera, Sự an vui của giáo viên trong giảng dạy tiếng Anh, một phương pháp tiếp cận sinh thái, nhà xuất bản Roulette cùng với Herrera Gilda Martinez Alba, và bản dạng và sự an vui về mặt cảm xúc của nghiên cứu sinh trong ngôn ngữ học ứng dụng, các trường hợp nghiên cứu ứng dụng phương pháp dân tộc phản thân, nhà xuất bản Roulette cùng với Beratrin Yazan và Herrera. Ethan được trao giải thưởng chương trình cố vấn lãnh đạo năm 2022 tại TESOL International cùng với Luciana de Olivari. Xuất thân từ đồng bằng sông Cửu Long, Việt Nam, Ethan thích viết lách sáng tạo, uống một tách cà phê đá và đi dạo với chú cún Shiba khi rảnh rỗi. Thì các bạn học viên cũng có thể gọi giảng viên Ethan Trịnh là Professor Trịnh nhé. Ethan Trịnh Vaitham is a Vietnamese queer immigrant researcher and TESOL teacher, educator, teaching and finishing the doctorate at Georgia State University, Atlanta. The work focuses on effects and well-being in language education that embraces queerness as a healing teaching and research practice. The articles can be found in the International Journal of Qualitative Studies in Education, LGBTQ Policy Journal, Journal of Homosexuality, Genealogy, Multicultural Perspective, the Qualitative Report, and other book chapters. Ethan has published more than 50 plus peer-reviewed articles in various venues and co-edited 3 volumes entitled Critical Storytelling, Multilingual Immigrants in the United States with Luis Javier Benton Herrera, Teacher Wellbeing in English Language Teaching, An Ecological Approach with Herrera and Gilda Martinez Alba, and Doctoral Students, Identities and Emotional Wellbeing in Applied Linguistics, Auto-Ethnographic Accounts with Beratin Yadran and Herrera. Ethan is the recipient of the 2022 Leadership Mentoring Program Award at TESOL International, working with Luciana de Oliveira. Originally from Mekong Delta, Vietnam, Ethan enjoys creative writing, having a cup of Vietnamese iced coffee and walking with a puppy Shiba in their free time. So, buổi tọa đàm sẽ được điều phối bởi cô Lê Ngọc Thảo Nguyên. Xin mời mọi người nhiệt liệt chào đón. Và em mời cô Nguyên, the floor is yours.
Okay, hello. Everyone can hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for the kind introduction. It's my honor to be here as the moderator and to participate in Youth in Science, such a wonderful and meaningful project that you guys have here. And thank you and Ethan for joining me today. So when I was invited to talk about critical thinking, I was a bit shocked and also a bit self-doubted because of how vast the field is compared to me, and so it's great to have companion. And what we hope today in the panel is just so that you guys can develop and raise awareness in terms of critical thinking, and also explore a bit of the nuances in such concept and practice, and then eventually take away some actions so that you can apply onto the rest of your research journey, not only within YIS, but also your further future research. I have some slides. Let me see if I can share that with you. Okay, just check. Okay. Right. And we gave out this pre-session task, but I think not everyone completed it yet. Anyway, let's see. Okay, right, good. Right. Yeah, so the slides here are mainly just so that we can guide you through the flow for the day. And I will see that the title I put here is the agenda for today, right? So we have 3 questions that our panels would like to discuss, and then would like to hear from you guys in the Q&A sessions. So the majority of the time that we deal with today would tend to be the interaction between you guys, students, and us, rather than us talking a lot about this. Okay. So without further ado, let's roll. I prepared some introduction, but apparently Han did a better job. So my honor to bring together 2 panelists, so Ethan and Fu, coming from 2, I would say, very different backgrounds. And I hope that contrast would help the participants to see the variations in what we understand and make of critical thinking, and how we can take it forward, right? Depending on what projects you are working on and the field you're working in. Right, so this is the task that I set for the class. I'll just quickly share with you guys what we have so far, okay? But I do hope that later on after this session, you guys can go to that Padlet and share with the class and with us what you make of critical thinking. Yeah, so this is what we have so far. So I asked you guys to answer these 3 questions. Right. All of the students wrote in English, but I do want to bring in this translation issue when we talk about the definition of critical thinking, right? So in Vietnamese, critical thinking is known as tư duy phản biện, right? And I do have personally, I do have a bit of concern with the word phản biện, right? I'm not sure what you guys think of, right? When you think of the phản biện, but phản is like you're trying to win something here, right? Or counter attack something. And I think that kind of gives a rather negative connotation when we think of the word critical, or in bigger sense, criticality. And so I hope to hear from Ethan and Fu consecutively what you guys made of in terms of critical thinking. Okay, so I'll just share the screen here so that everyone can follow the Padlet as well as listen to Fu and Ethan. Fu, do you want to go first?
Yes. For me personally, I think whenever in time whenever someone asks me about like what do you think about what is critical thinking, I would say that it's a good and clear thinking that we use for whenever we want to solve a problem, we want to make a decision, we decide what to do or who to trust, those kind of process. And
Sure.
In order to do that, we need a skill set that I call a critical thinking skill set. That we begin with, we give up a question, we approach the issue or the problems. Then we research about that. The involves like we analyze about it, we synthesize about it, all the resources that we have. That how I come back in terms of the reasoning process, and finally we come with our final decision or give out the answer, the solution for the problem that we interested.
Okay, thank you, Fu. Just to quickly summarize that. So for Fu, it's critical thinking is a skill set, right? So it involves more than just one skill, and it seems like there's a process that you imply here, where we start with approaching the issue with questions, and then through the process of reasoning, like analytical skills, then we reach an answer to what you are searching for. Right. How about you, Ethan?
Hey,
what do you make of?
I think, but first of all, thank you so much for having me in the space. And actually, you know, when you read through this, I read through all of the answers and responses, and I think it's very interesting because how, you actually like came up with your own viewpoint of like what critical thinking means, right? So I think that is where you actually should think about, right? Critical thinking should consider about like criticality, what criticality means. So for me, criticality, at least for me, it should come from, the viewpoints, right? About the process. And you have to really think about how, whatever problem that you're doing, how is actually associated with, the social issues that, you are seeing every day, right? Actually, you have to think about, the marginalized population, who you want to do the research for or with, but it's the purpose of doing that kind of research, right? So it is very important for you to put the critical lens, whatever, this aspect or research or study or learning or teaching or whatever you're doing, because it's going to push you to think deeper and critically. So I'm not really sure about like how, I agree with Fu about like, that's part of like the skills, but I think, that skill is kind of like the starting point to like grow up with the viewpoint that you have, right? And especially it is not something that you try to push again other people or try to fight against, but actually it helps you to develop your lens, your eyes toward the view of the world and see how, the justice and injustice for other population that you're working with.
Thank you, Ethan. Thank you for actually solving the concern that I put there initially, right? So I talked about this negative connotation of critical thinking, and you put it out there. It's for your own development. Yeah, by inserting and thinking about your viewpoint, right? When you practice this the skill. And I think you adding up there where Paul started with by talking about skills, and then we have this aim where we looking into self-development to harbor our viewpoint, not to attack anyone, but to understand who we are.
Right.
Okay, yeah, thanks a lot for that. Oh, by the way, if you guys have any questions, pop up, then just put it in the chat box. And if we lose you guys at any point, please don't be shy to just shout out, okay? We would use mainly English, but of course, if you find any concept very difficult, then we're more than happy to just elaborate a bit in Vietnamese, right? Chắc để mình chuyển qua tiếng Việt nhanh một tí xíu là tại vì là Ethan mới nhắc đến cái khái niệm là criticality, thì thật ra criticality ở trong tiếng Việt của mình là không tìm được một cái từ nó một cái translation cho nó hợp lý các bạn ha. Thì chắc là mình sẽ tạm cứ giữ nguyên cái bản tiếng Anh của nó, nhưng mà cái phần trình bày của Ethan với Phú thì hy vọng đã giúp các bạn hiểu được đó là cái chữ dịch tư duy phản biện, cái chữ phản biện đó mình không nên nhìn nó theo một cái nghĩa như là mình phải ở trong cái debate và mình phải thắng cái debate này, mà nó nhiều hơn là về phần cái viewpoint của mình và cái việc mình dùng những cái kỹ năng này để mình phát triển bản thân. So let's roll back everyone. So now you talk about viewpoints, right, Ethan? I do wonder though, because you guys are working in two different fields, and they do have a debate, right, between natural scientists and social scientists in terms of how they make up the word, right? So Paul, I would be interested to hear from you when you heard Ethan bringing in viewpoint. Does that make you cringe a bit, because as a natural scientist you're looking into the word from a very objective lens?
Well, sorry. Yeah, yes. I would say that yes. For the first, because I've been trained as a natural science student, as a biology student by profession. So when in terms of like talking, whenever you come to me, give out a research question or give out a problems and issue, and you try to give out interpret your own interpretations from it. So I would ask you like, what's the evidence? What's your evidence? Like empirical evidence. So I will look for the data first. Give me the data so that I would look through all of your data and then judge that and then ask you more questions. So in terms of the processes, for me, it's a circular process, as I already told you, that I will question you back and then you will analyze it, will answer my question, and then should be something that we've proven already. So for social science, for me, at first, of course, like initially, it's a kind of something like mystery because like that's something that we cannot, prove, right? Especially for students who study about ethics or something that really abstract. And yeah, but then I realized that every disciplines have their own ways of recreate their own critical thinking process and then prove them in differently. So yeah, in terms of like interdisciplinary, especially in interdisciplinary term.
Okay. All right, cool. Yeah, thank you, Paul. So one point you raised there is the way you see it is very data driven, right? Because you keep asking the question, where's the evidence? What's the data? Can I prove that with data? Yes, I totally concur with you in terms of how data is like the central part of a lot of research, and I think it drives a lot the way that we think about research. I do have the problem as well with my own discipline. Since we talk about a state, right? This very big concept, how can we break it down? If we look at states as in just the governments, then it's pretty straightforward. It should be about policy. But then we also have to look at who make the policy and why they make that. And so with those kind of different levels of analysis, then comes the problem of how we can maintain this objectivity when we do research, right? So we cannot just say, oh, the subject of analysis is distant from me, and then you can view that from afar. What do you think about this, Ethan? I think you have more than enough experience with this.
So let me share with you a little bit. Okay. So I think let's step back about what Fu just said about data driven, right? So let's think about the data driven and think about the process. And I'm pretty sure everyone here is very interested about research, right? When you do research, everyone have to focus on data. But I was wondering, have you ever asked yourself, what is in data? Right? What is in data? How does data speak to you? See? So that's kind of the way that you look at the data is not like an object, but you think about data as kind of like the person. You humanize, the data to talk with you. Does that make sense? That is number one. Number two, now I'm gonna bring back to what Nguyen say about the policy, right? Sometimes you talk about like the data is pretty much like fixation, right? It is pretty much like pretty fixed, and you won't be able to do anything with that. But deeper into that, you have to ask yourself another question. So see, we're actually asking the questions back to back. So who look at the data? Who look at the data? And who executes the data? In other words, who is in the power to hold and execute the data in what kind of purpose? Does that make sense? And then you also have to ask yourself how data is used by those people in that kind of position. Now, because all of us, and I'm not saying that I'm an experienced researcher, nope, I'm still in the process of learning. But here's what I share with you, because we have to understand that each of us has the morality and the values of doing that kind of research, right? The ethical things that we haven't talked about. So when you look at the data, when you see the data, you actually have to ask the question, who holds the data, who have the power to execute it, and how the data is manipulated for the public to see. Okay, so because when you are able to ask those kind of questions, then you would be able to develop your viewpoint. You would be able to develop your critical reflection. Now, there is another aspect of this, critical thinking, and then I see some of the responses here, but the critical thinking involves with the critical reflection as well. Because, for example, when you go out, right? For example, you interview a farmer or a teacher, let's say, and then the teachers who lives in probably, a very, very poor area. And then you ask those sort of the questions like, are you using TikTok, for example, right? Or like, how does TikTok actually influence the way that you teach? I don't think that there's kind of the balance or the justice to those people who have to struggle every single day to go to school and teach. Does that make sense? So you would be able to reflect on yourself in order to see what kind of questions that you want to ask the people. Then when you bring back the data, then you would be able to see what data speaks to you. So when you think about the critical thinking, you have to think about the aspect of criticality, where you actually have to do justice to the data and to the people you take the data from. And that is something that I always tell my student, even undergrad or master student, you have to do justice to not only with the data, with the research participant, but also have to do it with yourself to disrupt the power.
Right. Thank you for this very powerful speech on criticality and critical reflection. I think that's a very important keyword here, when you say that a person would develop his or her critical thinking along with critical reflection. I cannot agree more with that. And so the three questions, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. So the question that you asked the student to reflect on would include, number one is, so what is in the data, right? Number two would be who look at the data and who execute the data, right? And then how that data is used.
Yep.
Okay. I hope you guys got the questions down. So what is in the data, right? Or how does the data look at you? I like the way you say it, because it's very figurative, right? How do the data look at you, and how do you look at the data? Right. I think that's easier to remember. Then who look at the data, who execute the data, and how the data is used. Right. Is there any other questions that I missed? No, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
you get it all.
cool. Okay, thank you. So I hope the students also get that too. Do you ask those same questions when you do with your research?
Yes. But mainly I would look at how believable, how reliable is the data. And in order to do that, I have to pull myself. I have to prepare myself with all of the specialization of the knowledge about what I'm working on, what kind of, for example, I'm working in biology, plant cell biology, so I have to read through all of the literature, read through all of the skill set, all of the techniques that I need to know about the field, and then come back to the data that you give me. Okay, I can give our judgment about this data. It is
Yeah, and thank you for bringing in literature review. we just finished, right? The student just finished that, and I think now that we start to form this coherent picture of why we are doing what we're doing. So what is why critical thinking is important? Exactly like Pu said, right? These kind of questions come in different stages of your research process. But yeah, literature review is definitely one place where the readers would see your critical thinking coming out. When you read the literature, you evaluate, analyze, and justify why you are doing what you are doing. And that's actually what the second part where we talk about we talk about critical thinking and how important it is. I would like to bring back this point on human. So earlier Ethan talked about human, like we are a human with moral and we do research, right? So is there any way that you think of that critical thinking can actually help us to humanize in what I'm thinking here is like empathy, having more empathy toward knowledge toward human beings in general?
So I would not say that criticality or critical thinking help us because I think that is part of us, right? It is not like it helps us, but actually us and criticality, are part, are one.
Right.
You won't be able to like distinguish it or like distance it.
Right.
But also because when you mentioned about criticality, you use the word humanize, and here's why we have to think about the word humanization. First of all, now let's think about the literature review, the section that you attended moments ago. Tell me in the chat, what did you learn from that section? One word, put in the chat. What did you learn from that section?
Yeah, so questions for students now.
That is
you
a
guys don't
question
have
for
questions.
students.
Yeah, so since you guys haven't asked us any questions, let us do that then.
Yeah, you know why? Because we aim toward what? Interaction, right? But we won't be able to have the student to have the passive listening. In order for us as an educator to educate the student, we have to let the student engage in the conversation. And in order to humanize the conversation, the humanity needs to be addressed. So again, it's my question. What did you learn from the literature review section that you just attended today?
So let's have a couple of minutes for the students.
Yeah, just have a couple of
reply.
minutes.
Yeah.
One word, yep. One word, 2 words, whatever words, 2 words.
Yeah.
Try to make it succinct, brief,
Yeah, that's right.
and straight to the point.
Yeah, don't hesitate to put down Vietnamese as well.
Okay,
Yeah,
so someone say
read them.
summary, reading is the key, research gap. Second that, okay. Analyze information, good. What else? Synthesize and explore, good. So Wayne, did you see what I'm trying to do here? I'm not trying to lecture them or like the student, but trying to like push them, right? To think about what did they learn, right?
Mhm.
Because you won't be able to see the data, right? For example, if we consider the section about the literature review as data, what is in data? In the chat right now, people popping up, the ideas and on kind of that, right? So we won't be able to let the data pass by easily,
Mhm.
right? Or for granted, but we have to really like push them to be able to reconcile the information, right?
Yeah.
And we'll be able to push them to think about like, okay, what did we learn? And that I think that is a point of like critical thinking as well. You start with the skills to synthesize, to get them whatever like the prior knowledge that you get, right? And then put back to the reality that you have.
Yeah, and it's also one of the aims of today's discussions, right? It's for them to push,
Right.
like obtain the knowledge, right, and think about how they're gonna apply that.
They
And
have to
yeah,
obtain, they have to obtain the knowledge, but they would be able to show at least, what they understand about it, right? Because I think, I don't know about like the school system in Vietnam right now, but when people talk about like critical thinking and like the translation, the student actually just copy and paste it, based on what we say about what is word banking method, right? When the student actually just learn and copy and paste it in the paper or in the computer or whatever. So those kind of thinkings, those kind of viewpoint is duplicated rather than complicated.
yes. And that actually reminds me of how ChatGPT is now potentially becoming a threat to academia. Because right, a lot of people say that, oh, ChatGPT can write a better essay than me. But I'm very critical about that, because like exactly like you said, ChatGPT is just as good as the input that it has, and
Right.
it can only recycle what already there. So there's no added complication, like you said. And I think that is something very human that and only can be done by human. Yeah.
Yep.
I haven't seen any further questions. Sorry, answers. So, well,
Yeah.
that's a question mark. Sympathize? Question mark. Sympathize in literature review.
Sympathize literature review. Okay, can you
Okay.
elaborate more about it?
Yeah. I would love to hear that too. Sorry, what's the name? Kai. So Kai.
What do you mean by that?
Group 3. Yeah. You can turn on the mic. Or you want to write things down? That might take a while.
Dạ, xin mời bạn Khải ạ.
I think let's move forward.
Okay, yeah. Right. So Phú, you've been listening to us and mainly, we understand that Ethan and I come from the social science background. We work with humans a lot, but I don't think we work a lot with data that related to human directly. Do you have do you have anything to add on that we might have missed out?
Not really related, but whenever you ask me, because background biology, so we have zoology and physiology as well. So in my department, we also have like graduate student with animal backgrounds. So they do experiment on mouse and also clinical trial on human. So whenever talking about human, in terms of human, so we need like certain set of criteria, and then to have the consent form whenever we do experiment on that, we need the consent form. Sorry, yeah, so we need the consent form from the patients or the people that we work with, even with the mouse. Like we need to go through a training. That's how you process with, do experiment on the mouse. So
okay. Yeah, cool. And thank you for the introduction of the upcoming session on another day, I believe, on ethical consideration. Okay,
yeah,
so
ethical
doing all of these, right? I hope the students here doing all of these are different demonstration of what criticality is in research. And we don't just simply talk about research questions or you have to do your analysis to prove that you have this critical thinking skills, but it's more like throughout this process, there are different touch points of criticality coming in and the rationale behind everything that we are doing in the research. All right, let's move forward to the very last step, also the most practical one. So what's next then? Now that we talk about what critical thinking is, why it is important, right? Why we do that in research. So what are the three, let's say one action from each of you, one action point that you would suggest the students to do?
I would like to start with the way you give out a question or the way you approach the issue.
Okay, right. So ask questions. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. Please go ahead.
I have a question about humanization, as you said before about the data. To talk about humanizing the data. Humans are known as with humanness and emotions, but the data is what can I say? It's raw. It's the information that we gathered. So to humanize the data, can you talk about the aspect of emotions and humanness about the data? Can they express it as you said, human?
All right. Do you guys get the question? I think he asked about humanize the data, as in you mean humans as the subject of research, right? And then the humans have emotions and whatnot.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, not like clearly, but we can hear you a bit.
Yes, my friend told me that my microphone has some problems, so I think that I might not interpret it correctly.
Right. Should I? Well, correct me if I'm wrong, right? So you're asking about how do us as researchers deal with human subject in our research?
No, I mean, you talked about humanizing the data.
Right.
Oh.
And us humans, we are known as humanness and emotions. We are more superior than the animals. And the data is raw. The data is gathered informatically, and maybe it's some kind of data numbers. And so when you humanize it, what can you do? What to put the emotions? What can we see from the data? Emotions and
okay, I can respond to that.
Okay, go ahead.
I kind of like get what you mean. So thinking about this, in every aspect that you're doing, you won't be able to escape from it. And then it here has a lot of things: your emotion, your feeling, your ethical values, your moral values, and on kind of the values that you have been trained, not only in academic background, but also like when you grow up as a human being. Okay, so when you bring the humanist perspective into working with data, right? I think you have to actually ask the questions about, first of all, how you want to treat data equitably, right? Because the emotion that you bring in, it can be helpful for you to work through it, to see through it, right? But you won't be able to escape from like how you feel about the conversation. For example, you talk with, for example, when you go to the park, right? You see a homeless person and you have a research about like, let's put up very simple questions. How does a homeless man survive a day? Just one question, okay? You ask the question, right? And then, that person give you a lot of information, the story, how, that person wakes up a day, go to lunch, blah, 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 blah. You recall all of that, you bring them back and then you analyze it. When you re-listen to the conversation, then you would be able to see like, this is something very interesting because I see that there's a connection with my background. Or, probably I'm a student and, I don't have enough money for a day, right? Then you would be able to see the connection, the relevant data or relationship, with the information that you are given. So the empathy and the sympathy are there. It's not in a separate mode of you and data. It's part of that. So there's no wrong or right. It just kind of like it is there, but you have to acknowledge that. Does that make sense? And then when you would be able to see it, when you would be able to reflect that critically, then you would be able to come up with the steps, how you want to analyze it or how you want to present it to the public. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Mhm.
One more thing. I'm here I approach as a natural science researcher. So this kind of data we gathered is mostly computational. Speaking is 1 and 0, which means only true or false. So when you say about what does the data speak, what can we see emotionally from those 1 and 0 data? Because the nature is only two sides, true or false. So what can we see more emotionally from that?
Okay. Fu, you want to say something?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
actually, I have the same, question. Because one of my lecturer is working with storytelling and interpretation from the story that he interviewed from the subject. So for the first time I heard about that, as a natural science student, I will question that, is that enough subject? Like, because he only interviewed like only 5 like subjects. That's the first thing. Is that population enough? Is the first question. Second one, like in terms of interpretation, when you bring more emotion on it, I would question like, is that still objective or changing like toward subjective, because it's also on your personal judgment, right? So I have the same question as like what you just asked, but later on the lecturer answered to me that it's different method. Like we natural science, we believe in numbers, we believe in something that we can see, like empirical evidence. But in terms of like different field, we have different approaches. So we accept it in the way that it will contribute to different aspects of research. Yeah,
And it comes back to and actually, Fu, you remind me of like one thing that I mentioned earlier about the viewpoints, right? So
right.
actually, now let's come back to the conversation at the beginning. What is your viewpoint, right? Because like, what is, it depends on the viewpoint of your life. And because we have so many different stages of life, right? So what is your viewpoint in order to process the data, right? And I don't think that, there's like right or wrong answer, right? Because if you continue to pushing the conversation to like, oh, this is right and this is wrong, I'm right and I'm wrong, then it comes back to like the binary thinking again, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So we have this academic debate between empiricism and interpretivism, right? So one thinks of the word as an objective subject where you can stand out of it and look at it from afar, while interpretivism would say, no, we are a part of it, like what Ethan has been showing here. We are part of it. We cannot say that we step out of it and then look at it from afar. So yeah, exactly what we started with. So we have the viewpoint, right? And it's totally understandable why natural science really persists with number as either right or wrong, but that is one word viewpoint, and there are others possibilities that you can look at. I think what's important here is we do not, like you said, push it to the point of right or wrong. You're right and I'm wrong, that kind of thing. But more like acknowledgement that there are certain differences, and also acknowledge that it's there. Like, oh, we have that potential bias there always. Even when the data is a number, I don't think that there's any guarantee that the data itself, like the numbers, those true or false numbers, are absolutely 100% reflect what the true is. And do we know what the true is to start with, right? That's a philosophical question. Let's not get into it. But yeah, the numbers.
Yeah, I want to add up one more thing. Even with natural science as a biology student, sometimes in some situation that we also have, personal judgment on the data by ourselves. Because in some cases, in the borderline, that some data is like, interpretation in the way and the train that we want. So we somehow like apply our personal judgment on it, and then, describe it like in the way that we think. So we also affect by our emotion and personal view of that as well.
Yeah. So definitely reflect on what like one question Ethan raised earlier. So who are you when you look at the data, right? And how the data talk to you. Okay, so let's wrap this up, right? So we have one action from Fu suggesting that you should ask questions, figuring out or exploring your way to approach the issue that you want to research. So ask a lot of questions. I also put in the material, the reading materials, like some articles that you can look at in terms of questioning. So you guys can have a look later, because we don't have enough time to go in length with that. How about you, Ethan? One action.
One action for y'all. When you finish in each section, I want you to write probably like one sentence. What you learn from each section. And then I'm going to ask these questions again in my section. So that is your homework.
Okay. So have a look, guys. When you see Ethan again.
You know that I'm a very strict professor, so you know that.
Yeah. As for me, I would say just to try to bring everything together. Now we ask questions and then we come to a point where we have to make a decision in this process, right? Then you should have this like a criteria for your choice. So either that is your viewpoint, right? Either that's after the process of contextualizing what you ask, or it's the discipline that you're working in. Then you have this criteria of choice for you to make the decision as you do your research, right? So why do I ask this question? Why do I use this research method and so on? You have a reason behind each and every decision that you make, and they come together to form this backbone of your research. Yeah. Right. So your homework from Ethan is popping up in the chat box. Everyone, can you please take note of that? My homework though is for you to go to that Padlet and do exactly what Ethan said, but for this session only. Okay, so one sentence, your name, of course, for accountability. So your name, one sentence that you of reflection that you have learned from today. I think we started a bit late, right? So
Yes.
yeah, so I think we still have how much, like 10 minutes? Or
So actually our plan was to ask the student to summarize their previous week, generally ask them to like give impressions on the previous week and also have a little bit of recap so that everyone, so the MC can interact with the students. But if you want some extra time, then we can spare around like 5 to 10 minutes for
Okay.
any group
Mm.
discussions, and then we can shorten the break times. So the official break will be until 9:45. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks a lot.
Yeah. No worries.
Yeah, so if you guys have any questions for us as the whole panel, please pop that in the chat box. Yeah, one thing about sharing your reflection, I think, is the language, right? So if you're not comfortable with English, please use Vietnamese, whatever that can express your thought. I feel like a lot of students hold them back just because, oh, my English is not good, I'm not gonna write it down. But don't worry, it's your own reflection, right? We're here to help. We're not gonna judge anything. So please use Vietnamese if that is easier for you to express what you think. And yes, don't copy from Google and binge or any other places. Yeah, use your own
To
words.
check for that, right?
No,
Yeah.
Yeah. I would be able to see it right away if you copy and paste it from Google.
Yes. Right. Questions, guys. It's your chance now. And don't feel afraid, like and don't feel sorry as well, like earlier you raised a very important questions.
Maybe I can start off with my questions while waiting for the other students to, pop some questions in the chat box. So thank you very much for a very enlightening sessions. I have learned a lot about criticality and also critical thinking skills and how it varies by different academic disciplines. So I'm just wondering, what's your because I'm from a social science background, my research is in modern slavery and corporate social responsibility. So I'm just wondering, so we need to apply a lot of critical thinking skills in our research, and how do we abstain or refrain from, reducing the critical thinking to, skepticisms or negativism? Yeah, does it make sense? Because we need to, like, a good critical thinking will be associated with creativity. So if we leave out the creativity part, it will only reduce to negativism. And so, and how do we ensure the accuracies of critical thinking? And, when we look at things from a different perspective, we need to ensure that we do not succumb to the insidious nature of human beings, So if everything is good on one side, but we should not look everything from, we should look at everything from multiple angles and perspective, right? And we need to be aware that the problem is multifaceted, and we need to gain cognizant of the complexity of the issue. So how do we ensure the accuracy of critical thinking? How do we ensure that we are heading off in the right trajectory, right directions? Is it too much?
No, if I might, I'll go first because
Okay.
I look at it from the linguistic perspective. I'm thinking about all of these academic phrases that we have to use, right? Sometimes I feel like they're very cliche, like, oh, we have to write it in this way. But then reflecting on the use of like catching phrases, for example, I think it's how we demonstrate that we understand there are more than one answers to these questions. and we're trying to frame this so that people can understand that by the language, the word choice that we make, right? So instead of saying this is the truth, right, this is our conclusion, we can sort of use the language to express that there are underlying and like complicatedness here, and what we see in this paper, in this journal paper, is just the conclusion that we reach from this limited data that we have, from the viewpoint that we have here. So I think the word choice is very important. Like not only with journal paper, but pretty much everything that every occasion that you have to express your reasoning and your thoughts out, you know, even if it's just a Facebook comment, really, you know, every way that you have to show yourself. I would say so. Word choice, that's for me.
Okay.
What add on? Or, yeah, I
Go
would
ahead, Fu.
add on. Yeah, add on something that whenever you, if you are a good communicator in either like speaking or writing, don't you think clear, right? We have to think clear and good first. So in terms of like, it's for me like showing your best way of thinking, the best way you can think of, and you should avoid biases and fallacies whenever you bring out, whenever in speaking or either write, to show to your audience that okay, there's no, you know, fallacies here, there are no biases here, is your own thought, your own analysis about an issue.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Ethan?
Yeah. Let me sip of water, and then I'm going to respond to that.
Yeah, really.
Like,
I really
drum roll.
like I really like full perspective, in the sense that we should not, you know, because all of us have inherent biases and prejudices, and it can also distort the information and how we view the subject in a very objective way. So I think that's a very good and relevant point. I second to that. And in order to, we need to detach ourselves from the issues, and also need to, you know, have a disposition amenable to thinking critically. I think, you know, be inquisitive.
Let me ask you some questions then.
Yeah.
Do you think that when you do research, and that is not you, Han, but as I think that for everyone here, the students here, when you do the research in Vietnam and you publish your paper in Vietnam or in Vietnamese or in English, do you think that data is accurate or is valid or reliable? You know why I asked that question?
Yeah, I actually never published an article in Vietnamese, so but I do believe sometimes there's some gray areas where a lot of scientists, they do manipulate the data in order to extrapolate the conclusions that are beneficial to their research, in a sense that in order to get it published, so they need to make sure that the finding is significant, use significant result, because if the result is insignificant, then there's no point of getting it published, and you cannot raise a voice in the scientific background in the committee if your results is nothing, or it's going to contradicts to the previous research finding instead of corroborating to, you know, current findings. So I agree.
So the question is for everyone here to think about is that when you do a research, you have to ask the questions, why do you want to do this kind of research and for whom? Now, if you do this kind of research for your own community, for this area that you know you are living with, right? You think about the connection with them and how the finding can speak and give a voice for that kind of particular community. Now, I want to challenge your thinking about this. If someone say like, oh, you know, your paper is published in Vietnamese and, you know, that is not valid or reliable, question that. Think about that deeply and critically. we have to come back to the questions that I raised, I think like at the beginning about data. What is in data? What is that? What is in data? Who looks at the data?
Yeah.
Who executes the data? And how data is used, right? If you do not believe in the power of data and the message that is coming out to support the community, why do you have to do this kind of research? And you have to believe in the way that you do this kind of research for a certain population, that people will come to you. You don't come to other people. Does that make sense? You have to believe in the fighting that you are doing. And then you can present it to at the conferences, right? Or whatever the professional spaces. And people will come to you to ask you the questions about what you did, how you felt, what is the process, etc. Then you are the expert of your study. So do not let anyone let you think that, when you do this kind of research, publish in Vietnamese or, do this work in Vietnam, it is not valid. And I will definitely challenge that kind of thinking.
Yeah.
Coming back to the questions that you asked him about the accuracy, about the direction, you actually have to think about what it means for you to be accurate, and accurate for who? What kind of direction that you want to see after you publish the findings, right? So those kind of questions that you have to keep thinking back and forth. And here, that's why, we have a group of amazing, future promising researcher here. We have to help them to think about the viewpoint first, before we teach them about the skills. Does that make sense?
Yes,
We have to
totally
teach them
perfect.
about the ideology first.
Yeah. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Nathan. So you
gonna
and
shut
Nguyen
my
and Phúc is
mouth
very
up. Sorry.
well versed. So three of you is very well versed in your field, and I'm sure a lot of our participants today and also our organizing committee have learned tremendously from you, from your very insightful perspective and very profound implications. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, just as very quickly, Ethan, thanks a lot for bringing that up, for talking for my research, because I spent the whole year justifying the discipline that we need to look at Vietnam, and the same thing that I have to do with my Vietnamese college as well, that, we'll have to look at this aspect of diplomacy. And I try to be the pioneering in this field, apparently going against the odds, but yeah, I completely resonate with what you say there, right? We have heard a lot from specific mainstream framing of certain things, to the extent that we think that is the true, or we think that that is the right standard. And I think it's always important to question that, right? Like, what if that is not the case? So thanks a lot.
Of course. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I hope that everyone have a good conversation today. And it is probably like 10
I think
p.m.
it's
here my
the time. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So, but I really hope.
You need to sleep.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
okay, yeah. Thanks a lot, everyone, for tuning in up until now. Also, share your thoughts briefly earlier in the chat box. But yeah, this is just the beginning. It's great that we meet our past courses here, and we have the forums, right, where you can pop any questions there, and we would try to answer them. If they're on there, right? We can only answer the question if the questions are up there. Right. So yeah, don't forget the Padlet, don't forget the homework that Ethan said.
Yes. You need to bring your statement to my section. That is the must. If you won't be able to have it, you have to do it. No choice.
Do your homework.
Yeah, do your homework.
Okay.
Okay. Right. So thank you everyone for participating in this panel discussions. And like Han said, we hope that you have something to write home about. Just one sentence, like Ethan said, is more than enough, I would say. But yeah, spend some time thinking about this. Do some reflection later on, and
Okay.
see you guys around. Hope so.
I will see you in rest.